be made available. A copy of the recording will be available to all of our registrants afterwards. We welcome your questions as part of the webinar, and we encourage you to use the Q&A function in Zoom to share your questions. We will aim to address the questions in the Q&A section of the agenda, and we'll also provide written answers that will be made available to all potential vendors on our website after this webinar. Next slide. I wanted to share a little bit about the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. We're a state economic development agency based in Boston, and we're focused on accelerating the growth of the climate tech sector statewide. Our goals are to spur job creation, deliver statewide environmental benefits, and to secure the long-term economic growth of the state for the people of our state. We do this in 4 main climate impact areas. First, through a focus on climate tech innovation and investment, we're helping new climate-focused businesses grow faster and stay in the state. We also help accelerate decarbonization by helping to bring down the carbon emissions of the buildings and transportation sector, as well as the grid. In addition, we support the development of offshore wind power in Massachusetts as an essential source of clean energy. And finally, we partner with schools and other educational institutions to build the skilled and diverse workforce we need to achieve the state's climate goals. So next slide. To advance our work in these areas, our primary activities as a government agency relate to making grants as well as early stage investments to advance climate solutions in Massachusetts. In addition to the grant making and investment activities, we have other internal departments that support this work and who would make use of a cross-organizational CRM, including our marketing, government relations, business development, and data teams. Just to give you a sense of our size, we're a 140-person organization, and we have a core operating budget of approximately $20 million a year. This would be our non-grants budget. On the next slide, we outline some of the priority solutions that we're seeking. Priority solution number 1 really relates to the CRM and the metrics database that we would see embedded in that. We would be seeking to contract for the development of the CRM and begin the implementation of that toward the end of this fiscal year, so at the end of June, beginning of July. As it relates to relationship management and data management, the RFP outlines in quite a bit of detail our current state and the existing workflows. But to summarize, let me share that we currently have a very fragmented data management approach that results in a lot of data siloing and inefficiencies, surely things you all have seen before. We manage stakeholder contact information in a very decentralized way through spreadsheets, emails, and also our grant making system has some of this information. And we track program and grant performance metrics also in a very disparate way, again, through a combination of spreadsheets and some centralized tracking. Now, where do we want to go? The bottom line, the core goal here is to create a single source of truth for all the most important elements of tracking our relationships and their interactions with us as it relates to grant making, but many other forms of engagement. We'd like a scalable solution and one that allows us to have customizable fielding and automation and metrics tracking and automated workflows. Integration, of course, is very important, and the ability to synthesize program performance in various ways and at various levels. Also incredibly important, and last but not least, is the relationship with the solution provider. We're looking for a long-term provider who can support us in both phases, the CRM phase and the grant management system phase, and be a long-term solution and service provider. Next slide. As we look to year 2 of the system implementation, we're seeking to replace our current grant management system with a solution that is either an application of or one that is deeply integrated with the new CRM. Currently, we have a grant making system that is not set up with strong portfolio and / grant monitoring or grant milestone tracking and analysis. There's a lack of scalability and customizability that we're seeking in a future system. And reporting and analysis is currently, relatively decentralized, and that's something we want to address. So again, our future state is the flips of this. But again, we do want this single source of truth where our staff can go into our grant system and see what's in our CRM and vice versa, and also be able to integrate well with our financial system. The other things I'll focus on here, are what I stated before, these last two bullets, which really get to the importance of this system in allowing us to easily bring together a full view of our relationships and the grant, the status of the grant, status of the program, and the status of the whole portfolio in a way that allows us to both understand our impact and understand kind of core grant monitoring and management metrics. So with that, I will hand it over to Sarah, who will get into more of the details around the RFP and the application process. Over to you, Sarah.
All right, thank you so much, Brooke, for the introduction. Again, I am Sarah Kostecki. I am the Director of Data and Business Intelligence. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the scope and what we're envisioning and some additional requirements. As Brooke stated, we are really looking towards a multi-year collaborative approach for this RFP. So currently we are looking for the centralization of stakeholder data tracking and grant making activities within a CRM and a database. And phase 2, which we anticipate to begin around the end of 2026, would be a new grants management platform to support application and data intake. So the main point I think that I want to stress throughout this part of the presentation is that we want to be flexible with what solutions you think might be best for our organization. So we're looking for vendors with strong technical expertise in building solutions for public sector or quasi-state agencies, and especially those that are focused on grants management. So the latter part of this presentation as well gives a recap of the key points from the RFP, and also gives the specific page numbers within the RFP where this information lives within the RFP. Next slide, please. So as we stated, we see this multi-year collaborative engagement in 2 phases. And so phase 1 is the implementation of a CRM/database, and I'll give you more information on what we mean by that, and integration of a CRM or database with key systems. So our users for this system would be primarily internal Mass CEC employees. And so our expected outcomes are the implementation of a CRM style approach to track progress and report key outcomes to Mass CEC and stakeholders, to store and track stakeholder and grantee information, and also data to track key metrics, and serve as a hub for disseminating information to grantees and external stakeholders. We are also seeking or hoping that project management capabilities for grant and investment making activities with drill down functionalities could also be a part of this first phase of the implementation and migration to a CRM. And that is because our current solution does not really offer a lot of ways for us to be able to track and manage our grants right now. I also say CRM platform/database because of the fact that we have a lot of information that we collect from our grantees, as well as stakeholder information that lives in individual spreadsheets across the organization. And so we are trying to determine if the solution is to have, if the solution is to have like an integrative approach, where we store grantee and key metrics within the platform, or if we have a system where we have, say, something that lives externally that is, connected to the main central platform. So those are just kind of some things that we're thinking about, and we didn't want to jump the gun and implement one solution over another, which is why we are putting that to all of you. I would also say that, especially for this first phase, our core business units, so those that assist our grant making program teams, would definitely be prioritized to get that information into a CRM first. Next slide, please. And then phase 2, which we estimate would begin at the end of 2026, would be the implementation of a new grants management system or application, again, as part of a core CRM platform or database. And in this phase, we would like to enable grantee self-service capabilities for application management. So right now, most of our grantee communications are done through email, which causes a lot of back and forth that we are hoping to reduce greatly with the CRM. So both internal Mass CEC employees and grantees would be utilizing this system. And so our expected outcomes are streamlined workflow for application management, from application intake to internal reviews and approval processes, grantee self-service, so grantees can log in, submit their applications, track their applications, and also enter key milestone data into this system. And again, thinking about project management capabilities for grant and investment making activities, living potentially in this space as well. Next slide, please. All right, so this is our kind of more detailed scope of work that is laid out in section 6 of the RFP, with more detailed functional and technical requirements to be defined with the selected vendor. And so here you see some initial or some specific requirements that we see for both phases of this project. So initial analysis and planning and business process mapping, both of which we see as key to success for the migration and implementation to these new systems. And so we've already also begun to think about many of these points, and we've also we are carrying out at this time some data inventorying and mapping processes to assist with a migration to a new system. And again, getting back to this kind of key point that a lot of our stakeholder information, our grantee metrics, live in various spreadsheets across the organization. And so we've been working really hard with program teams to be able to pull all of that together, know what program teams are collecting, and know what we see as important to this migration. So we're able to really better track our stakeholder information and better show Mass CEC impact. So I would expect or think that a lot of these points are things that you've seen before in other RFPs, but I'd be happy to talk about them further in the Q&A. Next slide, please. And so the below is additional scope of work to what we see as more specific to solely a CRM or solely a new grants management system. And so these are CRM general requirements and grants management general capabilities. So contact and account management, sales and pipeline management, stakeholder and grantee reporting and analytics from the grants management side, grants lifecycle management, financial management, and distribution. You also see stakeholder and grantee reporting analytics in this section. And again, this is because we see a potential solution as living in either or both of these phases. And so talking more about exactly what we think an optimal solution would be. Next slide, please. So an application packet, a completed application packet must contain the following: a cover letter, a proposal, vendor response answers, authorized applicant signature and acceptance form, and an agreement for services that we provide an example for on page 31 in the RFP. So please note that candidates must respond to every question and explicitly respond to the implementation and cost for both phase one and phase two using the templates provided in the RFP. And only addressing selected parts of the RFP will disqualify a vendor from the selection process. So again, we see this as a multi-year collaborative approach. On the next slide, I do also note that it is obviously perfectly fine for vendors to work together to come up with a comprehensive solution for us if your solution does not encompass the different needs that we have throughout this phased approach. Demonstrations are important, and then also to note that voluntarily shared information such as marketing brochures shall not be considered, but they can be submitted as attachments if you'd like to include additional attachments. Next slide. So who is eligible to apply? So Massachusetts presence is not required, though we would like to see some evidence of work within the state. Again, there is no prohibition against collaborating with other organizations, with one party taking the role of leading the application. And then general qualifications as well are listed there. And then also on page 25 to 26 of the RFP. Next slide. So our timeline, our RFP period opened on March 10th. Today is the informational webinar that you are all attending. April 7th, March 25th is the deadline to submit your questions. April 7th, Mass EC will post responses to questions. And so if you go on the RFP website and you scroll down to our timeline, there will be a link there with a PDF response to all of our answers. We will also send them out to vendors as well via email. Our deadline is April 18th by 11:59 p.m. So that is the deadline, and we will not be accepting additional proposals after that time. In May, we will begin interviews with top candidates, hoping to finalize that by the end of May with a notification of award by June and an anticipated contract by the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2025. And we have an anticipated completion of what we're calling now phase one of the CRM, hopefully by the mid timeframe of our next fiscal year in December of 2025. Next slide, please. And decision inputs. So we have some key criteria that we are going to be using to make our decision. And so the first is a preliminary examination. So Mass CEC will examine the proposals to determine whether or not they're complete, signed, and the information is generally in order. Overall costs, so total cost of services, obviously will be balanced upfront with upfront implementation and design versus long-term licensing support and maintenance costs with an eye towards replacing existing systems. So I think the key point here is that we know there are a lot of solutions out there and a lot of solutions available. As a quasi government agency, transparency is key, and also ensuring that we are being cost effective with this process is also very, very important. A detailed technical evaluation will be reviewed against the requirements in Section 5 and Section 7. And then we will also be asking our finalized candidates for customer-led product demos, references from vendors, detailing 2 to 4 customer references, including specific products in use and the go live date. And then again, notification of award by the end of June. Next slide, please. And so key takeaways are pleased to review the RFP and attachments to understand the opportunity, requirements, and objectives. Today, you are all attending the webinar, and we will be posting answers to all of your questions by April 7th. And then also, feel free to contact Mass CEC with questions or to discuss your ideas at the business analytics email address at businessanalytics@masscec.com. We have a person who is monitoring that, and we will make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. And the submission proposal and attachments adhering to format requirements and other requirements are due to businessanalytics@masscec.com by 11:59 p.m. on April 18th, with customer relationship management system and services for Mass CEC application in the subject line. So now I will turn it over to the Q&A, where Brooke and I will do our best to answer your questions. And those that we cannot, we will again ensure that we have responses to you all by April 7th. Thank you for your time and for your interest in working with us to move Mass CEC to a better state of data existence, because that is definitely what we need.
We're very excited about it.
We
And
are.
I can, Sarah, I can try to take there's a couple of AI related questions, and I can try to
Okay.
respond to those. We are,
Yeah, sorry, I haven't had the chance to really like look at the questions.
absolutely. And we are, as an organization, in the process of developing an AI policy. We don't yet actually have one. We have guidance, of course, from the state of Massachusetts. But for the two questions here, the first is, are you looking for an AI assisted search of that content as part of the project? I think we're certainly open to AI assisted summaries or other forms of sense making around qualitative information or other quantitative information. I think we'll obviously want to really understand the, what's behind it, and kind of the, making sure we have other levels of checks around and decision making that go beyond what is being brought to bear, or what is being suggested or summarized by an AI tool. And then the other question here that I wanted to address was, what do we have a preference for a large language model? We're probably going to be authorizing internally Copilot, MS Copilot, which I believe is a combination of ChatGPT-4 and a proprietary large language model used by Microsoft. So it's not, I can't answer that completely, but I think that's the direction we're probably heading in as an organization. But I also think we will be evaluating our vendors on a more case-by-case basis when it comes to specific applications that we're bringing in.
All right, I would like to answer the first question that came in at 4:13. So where's your current grant information located? So our current grant information is located in our current grants management system. So this is where we have all information around our awards, our contracts, our historical record of all of our grants and contracts. I think back through like, I don't know, mid 2013 or mid 2014. And so we are anticipating that that would be migrated into a new system when we get to that phase. I would also say, from my own, for my own purposes, data and metrics that we use to track progress and success of our grants. Some of that does also live in our current grants management system now. However, that current grants management system is not set up to be a database. And so the getting the information that I need for the levels and frequency of reporting needs that I have is quite difficult. In addition to that, we also have grantee metrics and additional information, such as who individual program teams will utilize in which to do application review and scoring. All of that essentially lives in individual spreadsheets right now that we are doing a mapping process on, in order to learn where all of that lives and what is the kind of what is the volume of the information that we would think we would need to migrate into a CRM, and then later on potentially with the grants management system, what we're doing with our grantee metrics that we are currently tracking within that system, and where that information is going to live.
I could speak to an example here in terms of complex stakeholder relationships.
So can I too, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one example is that we, are working with climate tech startup companies in various capacities across our organization. We may make a venture early stage investment in a company, but prior to that, we might have given them some grants to support the, kind of ground testing of their technologies, before they were commercially or even remotely commercially viable. So we might have a grant program, an investment program, and we might also invite them to an event. We might invite them to participate in as an advisor on some other stakeholder engagement that we run. So, I think, these companies are really important relationships of ours, and they touch many, many parts of our organization. And right now, there's limited visibility around those touch points.
I would also add on to that too, that our government affairs division as well utilizes a lot of this stakeholder information to meet with legislative bodies and other, other agencies and other external stakeholders across the Commonwealth. And so it's used very frequently, but again, there's no visibility into what are the specific relationships that we have with each, with each stakeholder. And I would say, from that end too, there is a lot of probably duplicate information that is being already, collected, managed, and stored in these individual spreadsheets. So being able to bring that in and be able to track that information and communication and activity with vendors across the organization, so each team knows what is the relationship that other teams have. Is there a preference for a specific package, for example, Salesforce Dynamics or in-house build? We have talked about this a lot internally over the past few months, and I would say from my perspective, the answer is no. I think again, balancing our needs with cost and thinking about, what we think would be the best solution for Mass CEC, in our evaluations, I think really is key. So I know that there are also a lot of, kind of out of the box solutions that can be like made readily available, whereas a custom build might take, more time. But again, we're kind of open to exploring all options at this point. But I'll let Brooke add on to that if necessary.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Outside.
So the question is, outside of built-in dashboards, what specific data outputs or report formats do you anticipate needing for different stakeholders, such as program evaluation or executive summaries? I think there's various levels. I think at the grant program level, within an award program, there would be a basic dashboard around, tracking, the stages of the grant lifecycle, the status of grants and contracts that have been executed in terms of, status of milestones, et cetera. I think at a level above that, we'd want a dashboard that helps as managers see a more of a portfolio level view or a sub-portfolio level view. And then I think there are probably more specific evaluation dashboards that Sarah could speak to as well. That would be very important.
Yeah, and thinking about program evaluation dashboards or thinking about the ways in which, we hope to be able to better feature or show Mass CEC's impact, I think it's a question of whether these dashboards would live within a solution, or whether or not it would be necessary to extract the necessary data or stakeholder information into an application such as Power BI. As well. Being able to pull key reports for our government affairs team about where projects are being carried out across the state. Also being able to pull reports for use in ArcGIS. So we want to be able to map our projects and where they are being carried out across the state. And so we are using data for that as well. So thinking about our key stakeholder data metrics information how it, how it lives, what are the governance rules that kind of guide how this information lives, and how are we able to not only provide the organization with an overview of, say, like key impact metrics, to provide our program teams with ways in which to track their grants and their milestones across different levels of their programs, but then also to be able to easily extract the information, or integrate that with other external platforms as well.
So is there a requirement to register our organization on any vendor portal from Massachusetts? I don't think so, Sarah.
I actually think the answer is yes. You know
Oh.
what? I'm not gonna give.
We'll get back to you one.
I'm not gonna give a wrong answer on this. So
Yeah.
I know the person to ask, and so we will definitely put that on our list of items to respond to.
Can the phasing be consolidated if a solution can support all requirements? I mean, I think certainly we can go as fast as our staff also can manage change.
Yeah.
We have a end of contract with our grant management system, date of end of 2026. So we want to be out of that system well before that. And that, and I think the limitations have to do with, time available, both on the vendor side and our side, but we're open to different approaches.
Yeah, and I would say, as far as like, is a faster implementation timeline desirable? I would say maybe, ideally the answer is yes, but it definitely depends on time and bandwidth, I think, within within Mass CEC, and also on the vendors side. I think with that being said, I'd also like to highlight that, we're trying to do what we can right now to think about some of these initial mapping processes and wrangling the information that doesn't, currently live in our grants management system or within our finance system. And so I think that would be, definitely something that we'd be willing to discuss, potentially with what are the appropriate staffing needs for something like that as well.
I'm not sure the answer to this next question, which is it possible to get a copy of a previous funding announcements and related grant award? I'm not totally sure I understand this question.
I don't either. I'm sorry.
Feel free to add in a clarifying question if you are able to. But the next question, sort of you, Sarah, what
Yeah,
type of data
sure.
or analytics?
What types of data or analytics do you want to collect? We currently collect a lot of different things across the organization. And so we collect data around our three key organizational metrics. And so that is and all of this information kind of lives in lives in different systems right now. So that information is provided by a mix of our Business Central, or I'm sorry, our current financial system. It is also tracked it can also be tracked within the Flux system. We also track our externally generated funds from Mass CEC dollars that we call leveraged funds. Those right now are being input into a spreadsheet individually by each program team. And we also collect information on how our grants are targeted towards underrepresented populations and communities. We also have other grantee metrics that we collect from our grantees that range from a variety of different, key impact metrics, to how many jobs, how many jobs are Mass CEC dollars supporting, patents awarded, patents in progress. We're also looking into tracking the emissions reduction potential of the early stage technologies that we fund. And so the analytics are really the data are really driven by how we want to measure success for our specific grant programs. And then each program as well, I would say, has relatively either kind of more sophisticated kind of way of having this information collected regularly from their grantees, while others are still kind of starting this process. In addition, we have some program teams that use outside third-party vendors to do, say, like a program evaluation, or to also collect data on such projects like our building decarbonization and energy efficiency projects, that we really at this point don't have like a good way of getting those type of data transferred into our system. And so I would say most of the information really is centered around our grantees and the grants we make, and the success and impact metrics that we collect from across our 7 program teams. And so that is, that's not going to, that's not so that's not functionally going to change. What we're really hoping is to be able to better streamline and standardize that process around grantee metrics, how the grantee metrics are collected, and how they're standardized across different program teams.
So this next question is around whether the CRM solution is meant to replace any specific platforms being currently used, and if so, which ones? Well, so for the phase 1, the CRM, we do not have an organization-wide CRM. We do have one that is a specialty CRM used by our investments team. We would look to take that, probably phase that one out and bring our investments team into the same CRM platform as the rest of our organization. And then we also have, MailChimp used by our Marcoms team, which may or may not be something we would phase out depending on the capabilities of the CRM. I think obviously in phase 2, we'd be looking to phase out our current grant management system.
Yeah, and again, I think too, kind of building on, how are we collecting grantee metrics? How are we, intaking grantee applications? I know another thing we talked about as well is, potentially surveys, and being able to send out maybe automated surveys to external grantees, being able to send out automated reports. And so a lot of these things that really we're just kind of functionally doing right now, and email and spreadsheets, that we would like to have, one or fewer solutions where all of these different activities that are needed by our program teams and our business units are, again, kind of brought into, to one place, or at least just a few solutions.
Question on, are you looking for the CRM to have built-in project management capabilities, or are you open, I think, to additional cloud-based software that integrates and would provide that? I think we're open to that. Your next question is, it's near to my heart, but I would say it's not an explicit area of criteria, a preference. The question is, would any preference be given to a CRM solution that also provides climate solutions? Certainly that would be something we'd be interested in learning how that might be, or what kind of if you're running and maintaining servers, how your data centers are run and what kind of energy you're using. That's certainly of interest, and I encourage you to share that if you have something important there to share.
Do you have existing portal technology that should be used to engage? As far as I know, we do not. We do not. Everything again is done through email and Excel spreadsheets, and MailChimp on the marketing side. So the answer is no.
Is there a requirement for on-site support? I mean, we are assuming this is going to be an off-prem cloud-based solution. Perhaps we're wrong about that, but therefore we were not envisioning necessarily on-site for support. We also have a hybrid office, so a hybrid or a remote approach should work.
And I would also say too, thinking about, what solution is required, and, what's required from the, from the Mass CEC standpoint as well. And one thing that we've talked about is, having our own like kind of internal, training and support person here that would be one of their core functions working with the CRM. So that's kind of what we would see as on-site.
More details, Sarah, on the grant self-service portal. Anything else? I mean, there is details in the
Yeah, there's
RFP.
definitely details in the RFP. I mean, I think what's really important for us is that we are, again, right now intaking all of our grants applications through email. So we don't necessarily, many program teams don't have a sense of the volume of the volume of applications. And we don't have a centralized place where we can, put our applications, and so a lot of this lives in SharePoint folders. And so really what we want grantees to be able to do is go to a portal or a site where they can see what are the types of RFPs that they might be eligible for, to be able to then prepare the information, upload it into a self-service portal, be able to log back in, check the status of their grant proposal, whether or not it was approved, or it's still it's approved, denied, or still in progress. Another thing that we are really that we really, I would say, very much need across program teams is a way to track grantee metrics and data through our invoicing milestone process. So in order for grantees to continually receive money from Mass CEC, they have to report to us the progress of their project or of their proposal. And many do this through required metrics and data that they have to submit to Mass CEC. And so right now that is predominantly being handled in email and Excel spreadsheets. So program teams will physically send a template with the definitions and data requirements that they need from their grantee for a specific milestone. The grantee will fill out the Excel spreadsheet. They will send back the information, and then either that information just lives within the individual metrics template Excel spreadsheet, resulting sometimes in hundreds of individual spreadsheet with data that is living in these spreadsheets, or that data is then essentially copy pasted or migrated into say a kind of short-term Excel database where the data for all the grantees live for a specific program or a specific award. And so what we are really looking for and searching for is a way to automate that process that is very labor intensive, obviously can cause a lot of room for error within data when we're thinking about, copy pasting, and having a way for grantees to be able to report on that information automatically, either through a portal or through automated emails where they submit responses to something like a survey. And then that information is made automatically available to Mass CEC or myself or someone on a data team that can then evaluate and clean the data as necessary. And so I would also say then for that as well, that also gives our team internally obviously more bandwidth to really work more on, working with our external stakeholders and our grantees in order to ensure the successful completion of their projects.
There's a question here which I may need to, I think I will need to get back to folks on and check in with our finance team. I will say that currently most of our payments are made through ACH, where we do have some residual percentage that are made through the other mechanisms. But I think it would be important for me to check in and get back to that you all through written response after this webinar. Compliance and regulation requirements, I think they are well detailed in the
Yeah. I was
but
gonna say, I think they're well detailed in the RFP. So we talk about service level agreements. We talk about the need for accessibility as well. I'm trying to see what else. capacity. Data classification, ethics, and security is also a big one because we handle sensitive data as well. Making sure that you can also comply to the Massachusetts data protection standards. So I would say those are, the main ones. Yeah, I would say those are the main ones. Accessibility, making sure that the solution will adhere to the Massachusetts data protection standards as well. And we provide links to those in the RFP.
Great. The next question was, is the platform intended to connect or share information directly via API or otherwise with other state or public entities? I think that would be a nice to have, but I think right now it's not a top feature that we're looking for. We understand that certain platforms within the Commonwealth are better set up for that, but it is something that is not at the very top of the list, to my
Yeah.
understanding.
I would say definitely nice to have from my standpoint, but definitely not something that is, I think, truly required right at the moment.
Great question. Any foreseeable federal funding changes or challenges that may impact this business process or other projects? Certainly Mass CEC has been the recipient of federal funds, both from the American Recovery Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, and there are other federal grants we've received over time. A great deal of that is contracted and in-state funding. There is some funding that is contracted and not in-state or will be, is based on a reimbursement process. I would not optimistic, but positive thing I can share right now is that, we are able to claim reimbursements on all of our federal contracts. And we don't see this, any potential risk that's associated with those contracts as having larger ramifications to our need and our ability to support this project going forward. It's very much central to our organization's kind of core business plan, and there's it's well within our ability to move this forward despite external challenges.
Is there a
yeah, and a good follow-up question, of course, would be
yeah,
our budget.
The answer, non-answer that I gave and the decision inputs, I think in our assessment and evaluation, of solutions, and we see that, obviously there are some solutions that are more out of the box. There are some that are more customizable. There are some solutions that also have, licensing fees per user. And so again, I think, marrying what are the core needs that we have right now for these first, for this first phase and the second phase of the implementation process, with an eye to, fiscal responsibility for us as a quasi, public-private organization that, do make our financials public. And so again, thinking about also, talking with any of you more about, what we see really is like, these are kind of the key things that we need, or these are the key solutions that you see that we need, and that we could then, potentially build on, kind of, another phase within this phased approach. So yeah, so thinking about, different pricing structures, what do you think is the best solution to meet our needs at kind of the most, basic or initial level, and then, what could we add on? What would be nice to haves? And then how could we potentially build up from an initial solution?
When do you typically release your annual funding announcement? So I think our process is a bit different from that. We do run on a fiscal year, July to June, but our procurements run throughout the year, and are driven by a number of factors, but not entirely cyclical or predictable. So I would say yeah, looking at our RFP page is probably the best bet, but you can see from our board documents when, we have authorizations. That's another way, of course, to know what is being authorized ahead of there being RFPs. Lead scoring, I think we haven't really systematized this internally, but I think a couple of, obviously our marketing team and our business development team would be two areas within the organization where they would be really thinking through a bespoke workflow or approach to identifying leads and scoring them and moving them through a pipeline. But yeah, right now we don't have a systematic approach, and we'd be looking to develop one. And be very excited about that. Is this project subject to a set aside for small business or minority owned enterprises? I don't believe so. I will confirm that also after this, but I do not believe that there is a set aside. And then a follow-up from our previous question. We would like to see a copy of previous Mass CEC announcements where we've requested grant applications for funding. And can we obtain a copy of a previously funded grant award? So you'd like to understand, what kinds of grants have been successful in the past to get a sense of what those applications are like. I think that's all subject to public records requests, but I can also inquire as to whether we can share that or if there's any that are currently publicly available. So that'll be a follow-up.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe the most obvious one would be the workforce development, but again, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how that works.
We will get back to you on that. Thank you all for really good questions.
Yeah. And thank you. And also too, actually, there's one thing that I forgot that from one of the previous questions that I wanted to touch on when you were talking about the requirements for the grantee intake for the grants management portal. So we have varied program teams that provide grants across many different sectors here in Massachusetts. And so I think one of the other things that we're thinking about is not only grantee intake, but how do we design the process for grantee intake? And so I know that our grant making programs, all have specific ways and, in which they like to solicit requests and receive responses. So potentially some flexibility in how those responses can be procured. But, also, kind of trying to marry that with, not, too much customability, because then we're thinking about, future updates to any systems and, how a system that is like too customized, might be subject to, to slower updates over time as well. And so again, here is our recap at the end of the webinar. Is there any final questions? Looks like we're about 5 minutes early. Okay. And if you have additional questions that you have been thinking about or would like to pose to us, please do send those to us in the business analytics email address. Those that are sent by tomorrow at 5 p.m. we'll post answers to in April 7th. And for additional questions, we will make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. And so I would like to say, I think from my end, I really appreciate everybody who attended this webinar today. We were really excited. I am very excited, having been at the organization now for over a year and looking at far too many Excel spreadsheets to get a solution going for Mass CEC, and again, move us towards better data practices. So thank you for your time. And again, we're definitely available for any additional questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Have a nice night.